If you love to travel, you are going to need a travel agent. And if you want the best travel agent, you are going to need Booley's Travel. Booley's Travel can help you with any kind of holiday wherever you want to go in the world, taking care of every last detail. From package holidays through to fully customized itineraries where you are completely in control of where you go and what you do. And the best part, there are no charges whatsoever. Rated excellent on Trustpilot. Start your next adventure right now by going to booleystravel.com. Hi everybody, and welcome back to part 2 of our Yukon Uncovered episode, which is part of our Canadian series. Let's jump right in.
Well, I suppose as well, getting around there, lots of open road is perfect for RV holidays and just get out and explore at your own pace and your own speed.
Yeah, and the RV, particularly if you've got kids, is ideal because, like you say, they've got more space for those longer journeys. They can sit in the back and play something, whatever. The great thing about the Yukon is lots of wide open highways. Like you say, we've got over 3,000 miles of highways, but also really great campgrounds. I've driven an RV and I am not your typical RV person at all, as you can probably tell. And it's one of those places where if you're worried about things, I've never driven one of these huge vehicles around a city with skyscrapers on one side and these huge roads with traffic everywhere, that doesn't exist in the Yukon. So I always say to people, if you've got clients that have always had that on their bucket list and they say, wow, I'd love to drive an RV, but I'm a bit worried about being in these big cities with one, that is just completely not a worry at all in the Yukon. So we're perfect for that. We've also got great government-owned campsites as well as privately owned campsites. So it really is ideal for an RV, absolutely ideal. And you've got everything on the back of you that you might need as well. If it's quite a few miles to the next store, you don't need to worry about it because you probably have already got all of those provisions with you.
Yeah, and stocked up already.
Yeah.
Can you just park up and rest wherever you want to out in the wilderness, or do you have to be in a campsite?
You can. They do encourage you to be in a campsite, but you can actually, like you say, pull up and actually do that more wild experience, if you like. You have to make sure that it's a government-owned part of the territory, if you like, because we have got First Nations owned lands, a lot of them, and that would be my only thing that I would say. You need to make sure that you're not necessarily in a First Nations land, which obviously has its own rules there.
Yeah, of course. Okay. So moving on to kind of the outdoor activities, and we've said it's great for hiking. It's good kind of adventurous paradise, really. So what kind of activities can people do when they get out there?
Pretty much anything. People are drawn to Canada because they want to do quite often those things they wouldn't get to do here. But equally, I always say, don't be scared of the Yukon and look at it and think, oh, wow, to go there, I have to be Bear Grylls, because you really don't have to be. You can equally be perhaps a more of an average British traveller that's not used to being out and doing a lot of extreme sports. If you're just looking for soft adventure, like going out on a paddleboard or going out on a kayak or a canoe with a guide, that's completely doable. You can literally go from downtown Whitehorse out onto the Yukon River with a guide, or without one, because it's actually really easy to go down the river there without any guide at all. But you can get out on a dragon boat, a paddleboard, a kayak, a canoe. Even if you just do something like for 2 hours, that gives you an experience that you're quite often not going to ever have here. You're going to see bald eagles. You're going to see and hear wildlife that you perhaps are not going to hear from a car. So I always say, just definitely get out in the water, because it's such a serene experience and it's just so tranquil and relaxing. The other things I would always suggest is flight seeing. We mentioned it earlier. You can do flight seeing over Kluane, over Tombstone, and over various different places. And that, I think, is, again, one of those bucket list things to do, because you get to see the landscape from the air and just how vast it is, really. But then we're good for horseback riding, hiking, mountain biking. We have loads of mountain biking trails. Pretty much any activity that you want to do, it's there.
Yeah, and in kind of winter time, we've got dog sledding as well.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. Sorry, I was in a summer mode, really. But yeah, you're absolutely right. In winter, it's a completely different scenario, obviously, because we can get down to -30. We can actually get beyond that. I have been there in -38, and that is a
Wow.
bit of a shocker. The great thing about the Yukon is it's so well equipped for anything on ice. We do have skiing. We're not known for our skiing. We are known for everything else, really. We have cross country skiing, but to be absolutely honest with you, we don't really promote it in a very pushy way, because we know our neighboring provinces, BC, for example, even Alberta, a lot of people ski there and then actually fly up to the Yukon for an Aurora package. So in the winter, what most people come for is 3 or 4 nights Aurora viewing. Quite often they've done a city break in Vancouver, or like I say, they've been skiing and then they come up to us, and it's just anything they want to do really on ice. The 2 top things that most people would do in the daytime, because obviously Aurora viewing is a nighttime thing, you need those dark, clear skies. So in the daytime, people quite often add on dog sledding, snowmobiling, snowshoeing, ice fishing, any of those things are really popular. But don't assume your Aurora viewing package will automatically include daytime activities. So quite often you have to bolt those on. And another thing I always recommend is hire the winter gear. You can hire a winter clothing package that gets delivered to your hotel on arrival, or even at the airport. They'll meet you with it at the airport, and it will contain snow boots, headgear, everything you can imagine that you'll need. Because let's face it, we haven't really normally got the gear that you would need if it gets down really cold. And it just means you're completely comfortable and well equipped to handle any weather, really.
Yeah, of course. And something that we provide is an awful lot of Lapland from over here. And you'll do exactly the same in Lapland. We'll include all the clothing. Because it's really expensive to ship that clothing as well. It takes up so much space.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
Yeah, it
always
literally does. And like you say, like those parkas that they provide you with, that pretty much takes up most of your suitcase. If you were going to go buy one and take it with you and then probably never use it again. So it's really worth renting it. Like I said, I took my 2 adult daughters. They didn't have that kind of clothing. I do, because obviously I go regularly, but we rented all their stuff, and it's great. You literally leave it at your hotel, they collect it when you're leaving the Yukon. It's ideal,
yeah,
really a good idea.
perfect. So in getting around Yukon, then we've discussed driving, we've discussed having an RV. Are you able to get around in any other way, or is it really a driving destination?
There's something called the Husky Bus. You can actually get both out to Kluane National Park, which is only within 2 hours of Whitehorse, and also up to Dawson City. That's summer generally only. I'll be honest with you, outside of Whitehorse and Dawson City, you'll struggle with getting like public transport. We don't have train services. We have an amazing train that is a scenic train between Whitehorse and Skagway, Alaska. So people often will take that as a sightseeing trip, but we don't have Via Rail, for example. We don't have regular bus services all around. So most people will self-drive in the summer. In the winter, it's all dealt with in terms of, if you buy an Aurora viewing package, that you'll be collected from the airport. You'll be taken out in the evenings for your Aurora viewing. You'll go out to an Aurora viewing facility. There'll be yurts, cabins where you can stay inside if it's too cold to stand outside for a long time, fire pits, hot drinks, all of that. It's a very well-oiled machine. In the wintertime, most Brits are not going to want to actually drive. The Scandinavians and the Canadians, they're very much more gun-ho than us, but we see a few centimetres of ice and we're terrified. I'm pretty much the same. I don't really want to drive around on it, even though it's completely normal to Yukon folk. It's not normal to us, really.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So moving on to a bit more of kind of culture and understanding a bit more about Yukon in kind of other elements. What's the local dish and food out there in the Yukon?
In terms of actually fish, Arctic char is like a Yukon thing. Also, we have breweries. We have a beer called Yukon Gold. We have lots of berries and things that grow naturally, obviously, in the Yukon. We have a company that actually makes sours out of all the local kind of organic local berries and vegetation. We have something called bannock bread, which is a First Nations type of bread. And we actually have a new culinary tour in Whitehorse actually now that kind of takes in all these different flavours really of the region.
I think that's one of the things that I love to do when I go somewhere is go and find a food tour. because you'll find some amazing places,
Yeah,
and
and
you'll
you get to
discover
know
an
the
awful lot about the
stories.
food.
Yeah, you get to know the stories behind it as well, really. And obviously, where we are is it's pretty challenging for growing vast amounts of different foods. And obviously, we get a lot of salmon from Alaska because we don't have that amazing coastline that you have in Alaska. We have the Arctic Sea, but your clients aren't coming in that way generally. So we get salmon from Alaska a lot, that kind of thing. Obviously, bison is a big thing in terms of meat. That's fairly regular on most kind of menus that you see in the Yukon as well.
On to a bit of planning tips now, and a bit of practical advice for people. So, what's the one thing a traveller should pack that they probably haven't thought of?
I think even in the summer months, always pack some layers because it can be unpredictable. It can be a bit chilly, perhaps in the evening or first thing in the morning. You might need that jacket or just a bit of warmth, or a rainproof jacket is also always good. Anywhere where you're near mountains, for example, is always going to be unpredictable on weather. Generally, like I said, we're pretty dry. You're never going to rule out the chance of getting wet somewhere. I was on a hike once in Kluane National Park, and it really what did come down. All of a sudden, we had a lot of rain, but that's pretty unusual. I haven't been many times and seen a huge amount of rain. But yeah, like sunscreen, obviously, because people think, oh, it's never going to be that hot in the Yukon, but it can be. It's like our weather. It's a lot more unpredictable now than it used to be, so that you can get really hot days. So I would say layers, good footwear, because obviously anywhere you go in the Yukon, there's great opportunities for hiking, walking. In Dawson City, for example, it's dirt roads, most of it as well. That's just a kind of the appeal of Dawson City, really. Yeah, fairly good footwear. Like instead of just trainers, for example, I would have some walking shoes if you can.
Yeah, okay. And we've talked about getting to Yukon from Vancouver. How else can people get there from the UK?
Like I said, if people come into Alaska, sometimes we get cruise traffic. For example, someone like Holland America coming to Skagway, you can do a day trip. You can do multi-day trips actually from Skagway, which is obviously a huge port with many different cruise lines coming in. And we've got that White Pass Railroad, which people can take, which is an all-day trip. You can do different combinations of it. That's pretty amazing as well. In terms of other ways to get to the Yukon, you don't have to just come via Vancouver. You can come into, say, Calgary, for example, WestJet fly from London, Calgary, and then you can get a Calgary Whitehorse service with someone like Air North. Air North is our Yukon-based and Yukon-owned airline. It's based out of our capital city in Whitehorse, and they connect to loads of other places like Toronto, Eastern gateways, as well as Western gateways. So you could twin us with somewhere completely on the other side of the country and still get to the Yukon and do a twin centre. You can also fly between Whitehorse in the south of the territory to Dawson City in the north. So if you've got someone that says, I'd really love to see Dawson City, I'm not up for driving, I don't really want to drive, how else can I get there? They could combine Whitehorse and Dawson City and do that as a twin centre and get around with tours in both, and then just take a flight of about an hour and a half in between the two.
Okay, and how long would that take to drive?
If you drove it, it's 300 miles. So it's basically a 6-hour drive. So if your client decided, okay, I just want to do Dawson because I hear that's got all this amazing gold rush history, etc. If they drove it, it's pretty much a straight line north. You can't get lost. It's an amazing drive. There's lots of areas on the way you can pull out. There's Five Finger Rapids. There's some beautiful places you can pull out and have a picnic or lunch stop on the way. And it sounds mad. 300 miles to us Brits, we think, oh no, because we imagine doing 300 miles here. And let's face it, I don't want to do that. But 300 miles in the Yukon is not a problem because you're not going to be battling traffic and things that we would perhaps be worried about here.
Yeah, okay. I'm looking for some twin centre options, which you've mentioned already. What would you pair it well with if you want to have a little bit of a beach day with that as well? Yeah, awesome. How long would you recommend is the ideal stay to get around and see the things that you should see in Yukon?
If you're on a summer self-drive, I would generally allow at least 10 days. 10 to 14 days would be optimum in terms of the kind of distance. If you want to do in the Yukon, we lend ourselves to a circular route very well, literally in and out of Whitehorse. So yeah, I would say about 2 weeks if you want to do the Yukon and have plenty of time to stop a few nights in each place rather than moving on. I think us Brits, we don't want to be behind a wheel all the time. We want to be able to settle down somewhere. The Canadians and Americans, they tend to move on a lot quicker than we do. They'll do a lot more distance, but I think we don't necessarily always want to do that. So I would say about 2 weeks. If you're going to combine us with Alaska, I would say 2.5 to 3 weeks, really, quite honestly,
Okay.
because of the distance.
All right.
It's a lot more distance if you're combining Alaska as well.
Okay. Have you got a favourite story for us from Yukon?
Favorite stories. I took a group once, there's lots of them, but I took a group once and one of our group actually had a drone and wanted to fly the drone where we were. We were on a hike, and in order to take the drone to a position where it could get like a much better kind of aerial view, my boss at the time said, oh, will you stay down here and I'll take this person, a guy, up to a place where I know he can get a much better place to launch the drone or whatever from. So with that, she handed me the bear spray and just said, oh, here's the bear spray in case any bears come up or whatever. And I was just horrified at the thought of being there in charge of people, in charge of about 4 other people, just waiting for the bear to arrive. And fortunately, no bear came up, but there's been many instances where bears just crossed the road in front of us. I actually was on that famous White Pass Railroad once, and I did a double take out of the window because I thought, my goodness, what is that? In my peripheral vision, it was almost like the Loch Ness monster had appeared, because it runs past a lake on one of the routes, and it was a moose, just a giant moose swimming, and his head was just bobbing along, like adjacent to the train where I was looking out. I guess things like that are very memorable, as are things like flight seeing, because obviously you've got to be good with little planes. And I did go once and it was particularly windy and the plane was bobbing very considerably whilst I was up there. And I'm not always the best on tiny planes. And this was one with literally a seat for myself and my co-worker and then the pilot in the front. So when that's dropping and on the wind,
Yeah.
you're looking down on all the glaciers and everything below you, that can be a little bit...
I bet, yeah. So if somebody's listening right now, they think Yukon sounds absolutely amazing, which it does, but maybe it's a bit too rugged for them. What would you say to them?
It's really not. You can be that person that wants that. You can literally get a backcountry permit and say, I'm going off with freeze-dried food. My global marketing manager does exactly that, and he'll go off for 2 weeks and not see another soul. And that, I think, for a lot of Brits is horrifying, because we're thinking of all those things like bears and what do we do if we come across one and things like that. There's a huge amount of outfitters, as they call them, in the Yukons, which means like these little tour operators that will guide you, will take you on a guided hike. They know all the places to go. They know signs of bear activity and things like that, and just the way to deal with anything that might come up. And I think you can be the person that just wants to pull into a parking area with a waterfall and have a picnic. You don't necessarily want to go off on a 10-mile hike. Tombstone Territorial Park, which is absolutely beautiful and I always think when you look at it, it's like you can imagine the dinosaurs walking along, because it's just this huge landscape and it turns red and gold in late August with the fall colour. I take groups and we do a hike called the Golden Side hike, and that's just like an hour and a half and it's fairly easy terrain and it's something anyone could do. I'm no athlete, so you can totally pick and choose, I think, what you do in the Yukon. It doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be super adventurous, but we can totally cater for the person that does want that if they are more adventurous.
Yeah, of course. And again, for people who've been listening and now want to try and taste for themselves and get out there, what's the best way for them to organise a perfect trip out to the Yukon?
I always advocate a travel agent. I was a travel agent and a tour operator myself. I sold the US and Canada for 13 years. And I think go to somebody that can put together that trip for you, like yourself, Jason, that you can like hand over that bucket list of what you want to do. And then they will do the research and they will check that out for you. I think, let's face it, Canada isn't a bucket and spade destination. It's not a cheap week. And I love a bucket and spade as much as the next person. Canada is sometimes a once in a lifetime trip for someone. And I think it's important to entrust the planning of that to someone that can really call on experts and can review the different types of product out there and get something to suit you, really.
Yeah, I completely agree. And there's many things that you just wouldn't know or find. Canada isn't that highly covered on social media, but even if it is, I still don't think social media things going to look great on camera, but you only see exactly what that person sees and does. You don't know about all the other things that's available out in that area.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I totally agree.
yeah, and talking to a professional who gets out and speaks to everybody, who has those wider connections, I think is absolutely the right way to go about it. Yeah,
Yeah,
awesome.
absolutely. Yeah, like I say, I think you could show up in the middle of winter and it can be, like I say, -20, and you could be completely unprepared for that kind of weather. And people think, oh, I'm okay. Maybe I've skied sometime. That might only be like -12 or something. But it sounds crazy when we say only -12. But in the Yukon, you wouldn't even feel that out there. Like that, it's such a dry cold that, you know, it's things like that, just being prepared for that sort of temperature. You want to make sure you can enjoy everything. You want to go dog sledding or snowshoeing or whatever. Yeah, things like that are important. I guess the only other thing I would say, we don't generally push shoulder seasons. So if someone says to me, shall I go out mid-April, mid-May? No, I wouldn't say go do that. I would say if you want a winter experience, if you really want true winter, then, you know, December, January, February, March. If you want a summer experience in that you want the weather to be agreeable enough to drive around and be in fairly light clothing, then I would say beginning of June to mid-September. I wouldn't generally send anyone out on a summer fly drive any later than the second week of September. I wouldn't say go in October, for example, because then weather is changing already for winter by that point.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, awesome. So if you've been inspired by what you've heard today, and if you want to start planning your trip to Yukon, then absolutely get in contact with us. As you can see, we talk to all the professionals who have all information and must-see things and do's that you absolutely do not want to miss out on. I would love to help you arrange that perfect trip out through Yukon and maybe combine it with an Alaskan cruise as well, if that's what you want to do. You can find me all over socials, on Facebook, Bullies Travel, our website, bulliestravel.com, and many other streams. So please just reach out and get in contact. If you're not already following this podcast, make sure you like and follow and always share, because it helps to be able to spread the love and help other people find all this amazing content that we're producing for you guys. So Della, thanks a lot for joining us. I appreciate having you here again. It's been a really insightful session, so thank you very much. And yeah, that's all. Bye for now.
Thank you, Jason. Bye.